Hi, guys.
Hi, sorry I had a Wang
Well,
test.
that's okay, Aaron. You don't have to apologize. By the way, Aaron, I got your DBQ back to you and gave you some feedback. I don't see Sophia Zara on the list, but I got hers back too. And Olivia, I got yours back too, but I don't see any of them on the list today. So anyhow, all right, folks, if you missed yesterday, we did a few important things. We went over the new rubric for this modified DBQ. Don't stress if that caught your attention. What new rubric? Guys, it's all the same information. Basically, they just have the points distributed differently. You're still basically doing the exact same task. I want you to write the same DBQ that you've been trying to write all year. Even though the rubric looks slightly different, trust me, it's the same basic point. They just have them distributed differently. So you can check my videos from yesterday. I did a full breakdown of the new DBQ on my May 4th video, and I also went over the progressive DBQ in my afternoon video. So both of my videos from yesterday, I really, really highly recommend you guys checking out and watching. If you missed them, they're really helpful, not only for going over the rubric, but we did more DBQ practice. We looked at 2 awesome DBQs for that progressive prompt. So check out the videos for May 4th, please. All right. Hi, Grace. Here are the learning targets, guys. We're just going to do chapter 17 today, and this is the chapter all about big business. I'm not going to go through the full lecture, and I'm certainly not going to narrate all of this. I'm just trying to refresh your memory and try to really highlight what I think is the most important stuff. Obviously, guys, if you're talking about big business, you have to talk about how these companies have grown into such large monopolies and large corporations here. Just describing, guys, vertical and horizontal integration is really important. I'm not going to describe those 2 terms for you right now, but be aware that you have to know what those 2 terms are. Those are how many of these corporations and trusts grow. Also know what the management revolution is. New divisions within corporations. All of a sudden, we've got human resources and loss prevention. We've got a different head of the or a different branch of the company specifically worried about, logistics and movement of supplies. We don't want the person who's responsible for hiring people also responsible for, the train schedules. You get it. Companies break down in divisions today. That's called the management revolution. So just be aware of what those vocab terms are. You should recognize a couple of these names like Rockefeller and Carnegie. You should totally know what de-skilling of labor and scientific management is, taking tasks that are complex and making them so simple that if you lose your hand, I can replace you with another worker in a matter of days. Understanding the immigration wave that's going to come here, not only from Southern and Eastern Europe, but also picking up majorly from China in the 1860s. And please be aware that we're going to start to see massive organization of labor during this period. Cool. Those are the vocab terms. I hope you guys are familiar with them. Looking down at the learning targets real quick. We don't need to do all those, folks, but we need to understand certainly how these corporations grew in size. We need to learn the response of workers and differences between labor unions, the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor, for example. So hopefully that jogged your memory. Let's just go through it real quick. The years, guys, we're primarily in the 1870s through the 1890s today. That's primarily what we're going to be talking about right here. Now, you have to know this. This is what I think is probably the more important component of industrialization, is there is a lack of government regulation. This is a really important slide, guys. These are all the characteristics of industrial nations. I don't care if you're talking about, China in the 1970s or India, in another period in the late 20th century. These are the characteristics that developing and industrialized nations go through. Increased use of steel and coal, lots of extractive industries. They'll have favorable government policies where there really won't be any regulation of these industries. They'll have lots of cheap labor flowing in. They'll have a growth of big urban centers. They'll have more connectivity through transportation and communication technology, whether it's trains or telegraphs. And you are going to see a rising standard of living, folks. Don't think that just because we're industrializing, everyone in this country is all of a sudden a poor, oppressed worker who's getting, exploited. That certainly is happening. But guys, a lot of Americans are going to experience that rising standard of living. Same thing is happening in China and India and all over the developing world. Yeah, certain people are getting screwed and totally exploited, but a majority of people are actually seeing a rising standard of living, and they're able to have a rate of material consumption that's much more comfortable for them. And we'll have the emergence of a middle class. So just know those characteristics. All of these things, guys, are happening. This is the reason this slide is so important, folks, because this is really the skeleton for any essay about the growth of big business. Look at all this stuff, guys. If you're given an essay about the growth of big business, this is the skeleton or the framework for making it happen. Fill in examples. for each one of these things. Oh, skyscrapers, Carnegie's steel mills, for example. Anyhow, you get where I'm going with this. You really need to know this slide right there. You just need to know who Rockefeller and Carnegie are, understand what they do, understand the environmental degradation that goes along with industrialization. Bam. This is just vocabulary terms. We already talked about them, and you need to know them by now. The word trust, guys, this is not a business class, folks. If you are interested in business and going to business school, they will give you different definitions for trust and corporations and things of that nature. For our class, when you see the word trust, you just need to think of an incredibly large company that has combined with a lot of other smaller companies, and they control essentially the product that they are selling, whether you're selling sugar or steel or nails or whatever. Or salt in this case, you have consolidated enough of the business, the supply chain, and the distribution that you have formed a trust. Sometimes trusts are monopolies. Sometimes they're not, but be aware of what a trust is. It's a business term that's a little bit more complex than we need to understand for APUSH. But when you see trust, they're referring to a large company or a corporation. You'll see Teddy Roosevelt get his reputation as a trust buster for using the Sherman Antitrust Act. We'll later see other laws like the Clayton Antitrust Act that are meant to break these trusts up if the government's determined they're too large. So know what they are. I've got to sneeze so bad it's going to come out in a second. Here's the immigration numbers. You guys know this. If you're Italian like myself, this is probably when your Italian ancestors arrived right around 1900. But guys, from 1870s, you can see it very clearly depicted on the graph. We have that wave of immigration from the 1870s all the way until the 1920s when we put that massive immigration quota on there. Much of this immigration, guys, is coming from Southern and Eastern Europe, as you know. Lots of non-Protestants, lots of Catholics, lots of Jews, Poles, Slavs, Turks, Greeks, Russians, people who are not your traditional Western European Protestant. Those are the type of people coming. We know there's going to be a serious economic collapse in the 1870s, guys, 1873, and that's going to lead to a lot of nativist sentiment, not only of anti-immigrant sentiment on the East Coast, but anti-Chinese sentiment on the West Coast. If you're really looking for something to read, I encourage you to get on PBS. I'm going to pull up and show you what it looks like. I encourage you to get on. Let's actually see if it's on YouTube. And I said read, I meant watch. PBS Chinese exclusion. Let's see what we got here. If anything pops up. Why is it taking so long? Guys, all on YouTube. There's so many different good clips from this PBS series. You might not be able to watch the entire series because you know how sometimes YouTube works, but I really encourage you to get on this. It's the PBS Chinese Exclusion Act. It will be very, very helpful for not only understanding nativism, but understanding how this period of industrialization relates to immigration. So that's my reading recommendation for you, or not my reading, my television viewing recommendation for you. Bam. San Francisco has quite a legacy, guys. In the lecture we did during school, I just showed you all these different place names of men who are very, very anti-Chinese. This would be the working man's party of California. And again, when you're in an economic situation that seems dire, when you're worried about your job and where your income's going to come from, it's really easy to blame the immigrants. So that's what we see here in this Chinese Exclusion Act. Cool. Go through this here, guys. You need to know who the Knights of Labor are and who the American Federation of Labor is. It's not enough to just say that we're going to have labor unions grow during this time. You're right. We are going to see labor unions grow. But if you guys are really trying to get a good grade on this, you need to be smarter than that. There's only like 15 people that log on now, folks. It's like the 15 people I think that care the most about getting a 5. Someone who's going to get a 5 on the AP test knows the difference between the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. So here's the Knights of Labor and who they're all about, guys. They're a very large and inclusive labor union. They're going to basically have open membership and allow anyone to join except for the Chinese here. You're going to have workers of all different types and skill levels in here. They're going to have skilled workers and also unskilled workers in here. They'll even organize tenant farmers, guys. It almost doesn't matter what type of industry you work in. The Knights of Labor want to organize you. Like, I'm in a teachers union, guys. I don't have like steel workers and agricultural workers in my union. The Knights of Labor are going to try to organize any industry they can. My union, my teachers union, it's a very specialized union. It's more like the American Federation of Labor. The Knights of Labor, very inclusive. Their goal is to simply organize as many workers as they can to try to bring about change in the workplace. Their goal, guys, is to get laws changed. They want their numbers and membership to be so large that political representatives can't ignore them anymore. And they start to pass laws like workplace safety laws, 8-hour workday, prohibiting child labor. This is their strategy, folks. You need to understand that they're inclusive. They want to have very large numbers nationally. They want to organize any industry they can, and they are trying to lobby politically for laws to be changed. This is not how my teachers union works, and this is not how Samuel Gompers and the American Federation of Labor is going to work. So there's really two strategies. One, let's change the freaking laws. The other strategy, guys, is, well, let's not necessarily change the laws. Let's try to negotiate for better terms directly with our employers. And that's Samuel Gompers and the Knights of Labor. This is a much more exclusive union. They're really only going to organize skilled laborers, basically only skilled white men. They'll have very, very small, they'll have much smaller numbers. There are definitely going to be tens of thousands of members of the American Federation of Labor in the 1880s. But be aware, guys, that they're all about collective bargaining. No. We're not going to go lobby our politicians to change the law. Those guys don't listen to us. Instead, we are going to sit down and use our power of the workers and tell the boss that if he doesn't improve our conditions, we're going to strike or we're going to do whatever. They're going to directly challenge the employers and try to collectively bargain for better conditions, guys. My teachers union, this is what we do. We don't go to the state of California and say, change the law and increase teachers' pay by law. No, we don't do that. We go to the district and say, you guys need to increase our pay. And if you don't, we don't actually threaten a strike. Our district isn't in that dire of a financial situation, but we could. We collectively try to bargain with our district instead of going to the state to try to change a law for us. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. If you just can remember, we have lots of labor unions, that's good. But truly, someone who's getting a 5 is going to know the difference between these two, and they're going to know the strategies that they try to impose. We just had May Day, guys. That's the national holiday celebrating organized labor. This is a sign, a famous image, essentially celebrating May Day. I don't know if you heard anything about May Day in the news a couple of days ago and heard, guys. There used to be, there are generally, when the coronavirus isn't going on, big parades and celebrations and stuff in big urban centers. San Francisco has a big May Day parade. Oakland and Berkeley typically have big May Day parades. You get the idea. One, person is relatively weak on their own, but collectively we have strength. Out of many come one collective strong fist. Anyhow, helpful image. Understand, guys, that anarchy is going to start to come into the works right here in radical left-wing politics. You're never going to be given an essay on that stuff alone, but be aware if you're writing about industrialization, you should probably mention that, hey, some people are really disillusioned with capitalism. They see where it's failing in certain areas. I'm not saying capitalism is a failure, but it's certainly failing certain people. And be aware that some are going to look to radical left-wing politics, as can be seen in the Haymarket riot. Guys, I'm not going to go through all the details of the Haymarket riot. I mean, it's not important who Albert Parsons was or any of that stuff. It's just important that you understand that during this era of economic growth, some people are going to say this is not cool what's happening. This lack of regulation, the way that some of these workers are being treated, the way that income is being unequally accumulated in the top percentage while the rest of us are struggling to get by, and they're going to look for radical change. And that is what is so important about anarchy and radical left-wing politics. Also remember, folks, that many of these left-wing demonstrations do turn violent. Sometimes labor strikes turn violent, and that will often taint labor union with a bad reputation. Businesses will often refer to labor activists as commies or red. And just be aware, sometimes there is violence that occurs. These labor strikes, these anarchists, some of them are nonviolent. Some of them choose violence to make their point. But that's the significance of it, guys. During this era, some people will look for alternates. Radical left-wing ideologies like anarchy, that's the alternate of this capitalist society. So we don't need to talk anymore about Haymarket. You understand the significance of that. Sympathy for it. Now, guys, we're starting to build up this us versus them mentality, this kind of immigrant mentality versus the established, well, we're Americans and we're capitalist here. I don't want you to think that this is like a huge divide, guys. I don't want you to think that like half the country is anarchists or socialists. It's not even close, folks. We're talking about a really, really small minority of people that are looking for alternate options that are seemingly pretty radical. That's why that's important. And same with the homestead strike, guys. I mean, the homestead strike has a ton of details that we don't need to worry about. You don't need to worry about like, wait, who is Frick and who ordered the mill fortified? You just have to know what labor unions are, folks, and you have to understand what strikes are. And oftentimes they will result in violence. You're never going to get an essay on just the homestead steel mill strike. But guys, you could potentially get an essay on organized labor. And they would probably expect you to go from all the way from the 1920s with like the market revolution, the Lowell factory girls, probably through the 1940s, citing different examples of successes and failures of organized labor. They'll probably want you to highlight when organized labor accomplished something good and when organized labor probably accomplished, they were negatively impacting things. Organized labor can be good and can be bad at the same time, folks. So again, homestead and all of the details about the homestead strike, guys, not that important, but you've got to understand what strikes are, what strike breakers are, and oftentimes if you have sympathy of the public, they might have your back, but all the strikers at Homestead, guys, lose public sympathy. They basically take over Andrew Carnegie's mill. They fire on the private police force. The Pinkertons hired to kick them out. Even if I was sympathetic with the steelworkers before, I'm not really cool with you guys seizing Andrew Carnegie's private property, even if he's being a dickhead boss. I'm not really cool with you seizing his private property and then firing on the police that come to restore order. You have to think for yourself on whether that's appropriate or not, but that's kind of the significance of Homestead right there. A lot of the goals of strikers get undermined when violence occurs. That's all I want to say. This is an important question, though. Look at this. What does Homestead and Haymarket tell us about American society in the late 1800s? Well, they tell us that a lot about American society. They tell us that American society is divided. Some people are getting incredibly wealthy, but there's a lot of have-nots. It tells us that there's a large amount of available people willing to take a job, even though you've got people complaining about bad conditions. There's enough immigrants that are willing to take that job still, even if you're complaining about it. We know that there's new political ideologies being introduced. Those are what Homestead and Haymarket tell us, folks. It's not remembering the details of the incidents to the letter. It's just holistically understanding that these are two major events. What do they tell you about American society during the late 1800s? To what extent did society change? A lot, in very many ways. The Protestant-dominated mentality became challenged by immigration. America prospered economically. America grew vertically with steel. America connected itself by region through railroads and technology. And lots of stuff changed. That's all I got to say for today, folks. I'm going to stop the screen. Actually, I won't. Well, I just want to remind you guys, I don't know if all of you saw this, but on Google Classroom, I also put the new rubric, folks. So this is what I went over yesterday. If you missed the video, hopefully you'll go back and watch it. I'm not going to go over it again right now, but this is the new rubric. Please familiarize yourself with it. It's very, very simple. And again, if you were familiar with the DBQ before, you're going to be just fine. You don't need to change a thing. Just write the essay you know how to write, folks. And I promise you're going to be okay. But just wanted to show you where it was, show you it is on Google Classroom, and make sure you understand that on my videos from yesterday, 2 videos from May 4th, I went over the rubric and I gave a full explanation of the progressive DBQ. You're welcome to check those 2 videos out. All right, guys. Any questions before I stop recording? No questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate you. Bethany, for the next practice DBQ, do you recommend taking it? Yeah, I think that is a good idea, Bethany, for the next. I posted one this morning already, and it's a little bit tougher. It's about American foreign policy from the 1890s up into the 20th century. So basically Spanish-American War and on. I recommend, Bethany, you do try to just pretend there's only 5 documents. And it's up to you which ones you want to try and use. I would look at all of them and then just throw out the ones that are, least helpful, and then just go off that 5. So start adapting it, start timing yourself, start trying to include more outside information. In case Bethany's question didn't make sense to you guys, Bethany's already looked at the new rubric, and she knows that she's supposed to use 2 outside pieces of evidence now. So I would definitely encourage you to try to do that, Bethany. And yeah, just look at all 7, throw 2 out, and pretend they only gave you 5, and go from there. That's what I would say.
Wait, could you talk about the new rubric again?
Nope, you can watch my video.
Oh, damn it.
From yesterday. Cool. Anyone else have any questions that I didn't address in a video yesterday? Sorry, Jack. All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day. I will see some of you at 4 p.m. Later, and glad you guys could be here. Have a good rest of the afternoon.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Mahoney.
Bye, guys.